I never thought I would be the woman who could destroy her own marriage. Yet here I was, sitting on the edge of our bed, tears streaming down my face, haunted by the weight of my actions. I'd betrayed Chris, the man who loved me unconditionally, and now I could see the pain in his eyes every time he looked at me. The guilt was suffocating, but I had no one to blame but myself. Chris and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't perfect, but I always thought we were solid. He had a way of making me feel safe, of making me believe that no matter what the world threw at us, we'd survive it together. But over the past year, something shifted. The spark we once had began to fade, and I let myself drift into dangerous territory. Paul, Chris's friend, was charming and attentive in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. What started as harmless flirting turned into something I deeply regretted, a mistake that would haunt me forever. I told myself it meant nothing, but the truth was that it shattered everything Chris and I had built. When Chris found out, I saw the betrayal in his eyes, and my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "Clarissa," he said softly that night, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held, "how could you do this to us?" I couldn't meet his gaze. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It was a mistake, Chris. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" His laugh was bitter. "You cheated on me with Paul, my friend. Do you have any idea how that feels?" I tried to explain, to apologize, but nothing I said could undo the damage. I begged him for another chance, promising him that I would do anything to fix what I had broken. To my surprise, he agreed to try, though his eyes told a different story. They were colder now, as if the part of him that loved me unconditionally had been locked away. "I'll forgive you, Clarissa," he said one night after days of silence. "But it's going to take time." Relief washed over me. I thought we could move past it, that our love was strong enough to survive. But I was naive. I didn't realize that forgiveness could be a weapon, one that Chris would wield with devastating precision. For weeks, Chris acted like the perfect husband. He was attentive, affectionate, and even planned a surprise weekend getaway for us. I thought we were finally healing, but there was something beneath the surface, a tension I couldn't quite place. I told myself it was just the remnants of the betrayal, that it would take time for us to rebuild trust. But then there was Maurice, my younger sister. She'd always had a soft spot for Chris. It was an innocent crush. At least that's what I believed. She'd often joke about how lucky I was to have him, how he was the kind of man every woman dreamed of marrying. Chris, of course, treated her like a younger sibling, always kind but never crossing any lines. At least that's what I thought. One afternoon I came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, and I assumed Chris was out running errands. But as I walked upstairs, I heard faint laughter coming from the bedroom. My heart sank. Something felt wrong. I pushed the door open and froze. There he was, Chris, lying in bed with Maurice. The scene before me was like a knife to the heart. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My husband and my sister, together. The room spun, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. "Clarissa," Chris said, his tone calm and deliberate. He didn't even look surprised. "You're home early." Marie scrambled to cover herself, her face flushed with embarrassment and fear. "Clarissa, I didn't mean—" But I couldn't process her words. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. After Maurice fled the room in tears, Chris and I were left alone. I stood there, numb, unable to form a coherent thought. He leaned back against the headboard, his expression unreadable. "Now you know how it feels," he said quietly. His words hit me like a slap. "What?" I managed to choke out. "You betrayed me, Clarissa," he said, his voice steady. "You slept with Paul, and I forgave you, didn't I? but you needed to understand what it's like to be hurt like that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You planned this? You used my sister to get back at me? He shrugged, his calm demeanor infuriating. I didn't force her to do anything. She wanted it. Tears streamed down my face. You're a monster, I whispered. And what does that make you? He shot back. You destroyed us first. In the days that followed, I couldn't look at Maurice. She tried to apologize, to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear her voice. Chris, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. He went about his days with an eerie sense of normalcy, while I was left to pick up the shattered pieces of my heart. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, Chris walked in with a stack of papers in his hand. He placed them on the coffee table and looked at me with a cold finality. What's this? I asked, though I already knew. Divorce papers? He said. It's over, Clarissa. I stared at the papers, unable to speak. You don't mean this, I said finally, my voice trembling. We can fix this, Chris. We can go to counseling, start over. No, he interrupted. I don't want to fix anything. I'm done. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and regret. I moved out of the house, leaving behind the life we had built together. Maurice tried to reach out, but I ignored her calls and messages. I couldn't face her, couldn't forgive her, or myself. Chris, on the other hand, seemed to thrive. Mutual friends told me he was dating again, that he seemed happier than ever. It stung, but I couldn't blame him. I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. As time passed, I began to reflect on my actions and the choices that had led to my downfall. I sought therapy, trying to understand why I had strayed, why I had risked everything for a fleeting moment of passion. Slowly, I began to heal. I reached out to Chris one last time, hoping for closure. He agreed to meet, and we sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop. He looked different, stronger, more confident. I barely recognized the man I had once called my husband. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For everything. He nodded, his expression softening. I appreciate that, Clarissa. I really do. But it's in the past now. We both need to move on. I thought about the life we had shared, the good memories buried under the weight of our mistakes. There was no going back, no way to undo the damage, but there was something freeing about his words. They allowed me to let go, to finally accept the end of our story. The pain didn't vanish overnight. It lingered, a constant reminder of what I had lost. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I threw myself into work, into friendships, into rediscovering the parts of myself I had forgotten in the chaos of our marriage. I started writing again, pouring my emotions onto the page, finding solace in the act of creation. As for Chris, I heard through mutual friends that he had moved on. He was seeing someone new, a woman who made him laugh in the way I once did. It hurt to know he had found happiness without me, but I couldn't begrudge him that. He deserved it. We both did. One day, as I was packing up my apartment to move to a new city, I came across an old photo of us. We were young, smiling, and full of hope for the future. I traced my fingers over the image, a bittersweet smile on my lips. That chapter of my life was over, but it had taught me lessons I would carry forever. Looking back, I see our story not as a tale of betrayal and revenge, but as a lesson in the complexities of love and the consequences of our choices. The pain may never fully fade, but it shaped me into a stronger, wiser person. And for that, I am grateful. In the months that followed, I focused on building a new life for myself. I found a job in a city far from the memories of Chris and Maurice. It was a fresh start, a chance to redefine who I was outside of the shadow of my mistakes. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of independence and self-worth. Though I was determined to leave the past behind, it had a way of catching up with me. Maurice reached out one final time, her message a mix of apology and longing for reconciliation. I couldn't ignore it anymore. We agreed to meet, and sitting across from her in a quiet cafe, I saw the guilt etched across her face. Clarissa, she began, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I took a deep breath, the words I'd rehearsed in my head spilling out. Maurice, what you did was unforgivable, but I've come to realize that holding on to this anger is only hurting me. I need to let it go, not for you, but for myself. Her eyes welled with tears, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability beneath her actions. She was flawed, just as I was. Though our relationship would never be the same, that conversation marked the beginning of closure. Chris and I didn't speak again after that day in the coffee shop. His chapter in my life was over, but the lessons he left behind stayed with me. Love, I learned, wasn't just about passion or trust. It was about respect, communication, and the choices we make every day to honor those we care about. As I settled into my new life, I began to find joy in the small things again. Sunlit mornings with a cup of coffee, laughter shared with new friends, the thrill of pursuing passions I'd long neglected. The weight of the past didn't vanish, but it grew lighter with each passing day. Eventually, I stopped looking back. The woman I had been, the one who betrayed and was betrayed in return, felt like a distant memory. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had faced the consequences of her actions and emerged with a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. Life, I realized, wasn't about erasing our mistakes, but learning from them. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that the scars of my past would always be a part of me, not as a source of shame, but as a testament to my resilience and growth.